I constantly ask myself, why aren't we attracting more women into the supply chain profession? And with me today, I've got a lady who knows the answers, I think. Sherry Heinisch, welcome, the Supply Chain Queen, 2019-2020 Supply Chain Exec Pro to Know. I think you're going to be there for 21 as well. IBM Futurist, absolutely the right person to be talking to about this topic, and that's coming right up. So sadly, the statistics on the supply chain industry continue to show that we have about 20% female participation in the industry and probably a lot less at senior executive levels. Why is that? Why aren't we attracting more women into the industry? Do they think it's not a good industry to get into? Are there barriers? Sherry, share your thoughts.
So I think the industry is changing, and I think that there's been a lot of progress. Maybe how we're defining supply chain very narrowly isn't effective anymore. When you think about new school supply chain or the future of supply chain, I like to think of STEM. And I think that there are more women joining the ranks, joining the field. But what often happens is there's a few things. Number one, access. Access to relationships, access to mentoring. And what you see as women enter the supply chain domain, that going past that broken rung, so moving into management roles, moving into senior VP or C-suite roles, that number gets worse, Rob. It does. I think Gartner just put out a report that said it's 17% now women represented in senior leadership, supply chain leadership. I'd poke that number a bit. I think especially with COVID and things happening now, we are seeing a lot of women return to the home and have to choose between their career and their responsibilities, to their family. And this is a very real thing that's happening. I've been on several panel discussions, several webinars, and access and relationships emerge typically as like one of the number one reasons. So social media can be a great help for women in supply chain, not only, being able to reach out to others, but also learn from others, using technology as an equalizer, for example. I don't know that I could ever in my career pick up a book or read a blog and then just type someone's name. And then in like 15 minutes, we're tweeting or exchanging messages on LinkedIn. So all of those things are really positive to create access and build relationships. The other thing is representation. And part of believing that it's possible is actually seeing it. And I don't think that we do a good job. One tangible example could be, virtual events. Conferences aren't happening right now, but certainly if you have an online event, there's really no reason not to have underrepresented or marginalized people in the domain represented as thought leaders. So you hear a lot about, I've called a woman or several women and they don't want to participate. Well, that's really not an excuse. I think you need to ask another. There are plenty of women in supply chain, plenty of women in STEM that would be more than happy to raise their hand and be a bold voice and thought leadership in the supply chain space. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
Look, I think you have, and it's frustrating to me. I mean, I work with so many great supply chain leaders and business leaders, and I have to tell you, a lot of them are women, and, I don't want to be sort of biased here, but some of the best supply chain leaders I know are women.
Of course,
Why aren't more getting into the industry? What can we do to attract more women into the industry? And also I think in a way, a bit strange perhaps, but maybe the whole COVID and work at home thing is helping in a way, because people are now becoming a lot more flexible in terms of working hours and priorities and commitments and things like that. And I think people can see that, and it's not just women, but anyone who has other commitments, family commitments and so on, fitting in work with their home life and so on is becoming a lot easier in a way. Maybe that would kind of open the door a bit.
I think that it may, but it has to be long-term change. It has to actually be implemented in the form of policy, and then also having that commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. there's a lot of emphasis on diversity, and what I like to think of it as diversity is actually being, invited to a party, for example. But inclusion is much deeper. It's where you're actually asked to dance and participate, and there's that meaningful exchange where you feel like you're a part of something much larger than yourself. So while working from home and people being more aware of that work-life balance certainly is a step in the right direction. In terms of long-term scale and adoption, it needs to be actually implemented in the form of policy, flex time, part of something that's a systemic change in the workplace. And I don't know if we're there yet. I don't know if we're there yet.
I'm concerned that we're not either. What can we do? What can we do to start this revolution? What needs to change?
I had a talk actually with a gentleman at Henkel. He's the chief supply chain officer of their laundry and home care division. His name is Dirk Hallbeck. And he said
You're
that
the second person who's mentioned his name this week.
Oh, really?
I'm coming to talk to you, Dirk.
Actually measuring the performance of DEI was critical. So putting that stake in the ground as a first step can be really powerful, because I think that it gives you transparency and insight as to where some of the low-hanging fruit and where the bottlenecks are in the hire to promotion process, in terms of not only your pipeline talent strategy, but how many women are you recruiting? In terms of career advancement, where is that bottleneck, or where are you seeing an opportunity for career pathing, development, maybe continuous learning opportunities? So that was a first step for him in his role. And what he said, as he started to really walk the talk, and Henkel obviously is a great example of an organization who is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It changed. People changed. They were more aware of their behaviors, and it sort of became second nature. Now, in terms of 50-50 equity, it may not be exact, but what happens is it becomes second nature. When you really believe it and you really start promoting the right behaviors, it just takes on a life of its own, and it grows organically. And I've seen this happen in several organizations, but you have to actually measure it. And you have to be honest. You have to be transparent and report on those statistics as well.
Yeah, that's going to make some people feel really uncomfortable, I think.
Of course.
We have to measure quotas. Well, heck, people, if we're going to make a change, yeah, I guess we have to. But
it is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It is uncomfortable. I think the other thing, too, is being honest about discrimination and holding those bad actors accountable. In my career, I have been discriminated against countless times based on gender, or there's been some sort of adverse impact to me because of my gender. This could have been, a counterpart. We're doing the exact job and I'm paid less, which is common, as you know. Or maybe I wasn't considered for a role because I wasn't part of the boys club. I don't know anything about sports. I don't go out for beers after work. A lot of those things that are considered valuable in relationship building, I think sometimes are inherently biased. Certainly things are changing now. I think also the emphasis on core skills, and I'm not going to say soft skills because I don't think there's anything soft about them, but leading through crisis, leading through disruption, you find a lot of women really floating to the top in terms of their ability to think on their feet and make really, really good decisions with limited information, or as things are constantly changing, because that's what we do.
Well, look, things are slowly changing. I mean, it's interesting you talk about the boys club. When I first moved to Australia, 30 years ago, something like that, it was like that. That every business meeting was, 5 minutes talking about the football at the weekend. It kind of bored me senseless, to be honest. I'm not interested in football, but, it's nice to see over the last 10 years or so, particularly. I think that boys club culture has really broken down. But I think we've all got to do our bit, to get much greater diversity in our supply chain structures, and particularly at the top levels. Do you think there's a role for education? Have we got to make the industry, the profession, sound more attractive to younger people?
I think we do. I've actually started a mentorship series with Rutgers University, which is where I got my first master's degree. It's called the AIR series.
Your
And it's
first
really,
masters. You're one of these people with three, are
I'm
you?
sorry. I didn't, yeah. Well, I'm a queen who's unqueenie.
Yeah.
But I think part of it too is seeing, like I said before, seeing people in that role. And just to give you a little bit of background, neither one of my parents went to college. I don't think anyone in my family is in supply chain. I grew up very poor. And when you think about, the possibility of being a leader in supply chain or in any field, that wasn't accessible. I didn't even see that. So, take it 25 years forward. I think had I known someone or had access to that person, maybe I would have made different decisions. Maybe I would have considered supply chain. Supply chain was a second career for me. I started in accounting and IT. So, actually evangelizing women in supply chain, women in STEM, making it real, doing things like reaching them at a very young age. And this could be through social media, education, formally introducing concepts of supply chain in elementary school, in middle school, and high school. All of these things are critical. And then on the other side of that is, what can you do internally? How is your organization educating others on being inclusive? And there are some low-hanging fruit. The words we use, how we hire, how we promote, defining what leaderly is. I think a lot of times people assume that you have to look a certain way, dress a certain way. And also look at the layer at the top. Whenever a company reaches out and they say, we really want to work with you, the first thing I do is hop online and look at the leadership page, because that's very telling. It's beyond the Glassdoor banner, and the posters on the hallway when you walk in a building. Like, it's much deeper. It's the values, it's the culture, it's the attitudes. All of those things matter, and all of that is part of the education that you've mentioned.
Absolutely. Look, fascinating discussion yet again, Sherry. A topic that, to a degree, we're both quite passionate on. Let's see what we can do to move the dial. Let's get that 20% going up and up and up. So,
and Dirk, he's coming for you.
yes, I'm coming to look for you, because two people this week have told me about you, Sherry, supply chain queen and pro to know in the whole supply chain industry. Great talking to you again. And we're going to have to catch up again sometime. It's fascinating talking to you, and thank you for your insights.
Thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure.